Welcome back to Nest Talk, the Emory Eagles Podcast. We've got a little bit of a different setup here today. We are hosting Swim and Dive UAA Championships this week. We're super excited. And our next guest on the podcast, I'm so excited to just dive into everything UAA with her in her first year, finishing up your first year as UAA Commissioner. So we're joined today by Sarah Otey. If you want to just give us a little introduction into yourself.
Yeah, Taylor, thanks for having me. My name's Sarah Otey. I've been commissioner of the UAA since about, I think, first week in July. So finished up the fall season, wrapping up the winter season here, and excited to kind of see some spring sport action before too long. Come to you most recently as commissioner of the Ohio Athletic Conference. Before that, I was at the NCAA National Office for almost a decade. Started my career on a Division III campus as an administrator and played Division III basketball. So I love it, and I'm excited to be here.
So let's get into that. You grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I have to throw in, I am also from Virginia. Yeah. So got to throw in the Virginia love there. So you mentioned you played basketball at a Division III school, and we have to mention it's a very, very big Division III school for basketball, Washington and Lee. And then you ended up getting your master's at UVA. So what was kind of growing up like, and what kind of pushed you to say, you know what, I'm going to play collegiate basketball and then go get my master's?
Yeah, I mean, I played a bunch of sports growing up, loved them all, and ultimately my two college options were probably going to be Division III basketball or softball at some level. And I can't tolerate being outside in February, so that's why I chose basketball. And was really resistant to going to Washington and Lee, actually, because that's where my dad went, and I, wanted to distance myself. But as soon as I got on campus and spent some time with the basketball team, it was a great academic fit for me, and the campus just sold itself to me. I had a really, really great experience there, and sort of finished college knowing that because I had such a positive D3 student-athlete experience, I'd love to make a career out of athletics in some way, but it was a pretty typical liberal arts education, so honestly didn't know what jobs were even available in athletics other than basically an athletic director or a coach. And so really feel like I spent the first 10 years of my career just exploring what the options were that were available to me.
I do have to say that part of Virginia has about a foot of snow right now in February, so
and they don't know how to handle it.
No. Yeah. The same thing down here I'm learning is when it snows in Georgia, people don't know what to do. So going out of college, how did you kind of find your way into the NCAA? Did you just kind of go in and say, you know what, I don't know what I'm going to do, but let me figure it out?
Yeah, so like everyone who finishes college not knowing what they want to do, I went to grad school, delayed the decision-making process. And then as I was finishing my master's at the University of Virginia, a job opened up in the conference that I played in, and that job was funded by a grant from the NCAA. So it was actually an on-campus job at Hollins University, but it was entirely funded by a grant from the NCAA aimed at providing women opportunities in athletics and allowing an institution to start a position that they'd not previously had. So Hollins had never had an assistant athletic director position before. And so was very fortunate, lots of dumb luck through connections. I was able to get a position I probably was not qualified for. And I thought that I was going to like coaching, and I did a little bit of coaching, a little bit of strength and conditioning, and then otherwise did administrative work. I really thought that I was going to like the coaching and strength and conditioning work, but just fell in love with the administrative side of athletics. And so because that was a grant funded by the NCAA, it gave me opportunities to get out to Indianapolis and visit staff at the national office a couple of times. And during those trips, made some valuable connections, and just really ended up liking the work that academic and membership affairs did at the NCAA. So when that sort of short term, it was a 2-year position at Hollins, when that position ended, lucky timing, a position opened up on the Division III team at the NCAA, and I was fortunate enough to get it.
So for those who might not know, what was your kind of day-to-day role at the NCAA? And, for for those who don't know, while you were there, you were a liaison for the UAA.
I was, yeah. So my first 4 years, I was specifically working in Division III. I started as an assistant director, and that's when I started as a liaison between the NCAA and the UAA. Sort of served as Dick Rasmussen, my predecessor's contact. And so if whenever he had a question, he would call me. My role was largely compliance, so I answered interpretive or compliance related questions for 6 or 7 conferences, including the UAA, and then processed waivers and reviewed the Division III rules manual. So when people think about getting into athletics, that's not the exciting stuff that they're thinking about, but I actually loved it. I then went on to be the associate director on that team, so sort of oversaw the day-to-day work of the Division III team. And then my last 5 years there, I actually moved into a role that was largely a Division I role. There are only, at least at the time, there were only 12 staff members at the national office that were full-time dedicated to Division III out of 500. So I knew that if I wanted to continue to develop and expose myself to challenges that I wasn't necessarily getting in my Division III role, that I'd probably have to step outside of Division III. So I was the director of student athlete reinstatement. So my team oversaw NCAA rules violations that impacted student athlete eligibility, and I was the primary liaison to the Division I Strategic Vision and Planning Committee. So they do a little bit of D1 finance, health and safety, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and D1 membership. So a little bit of everything in Division I during my last 5 years at the NCAA.
I'm curious to get your thoughts because I went to a Division I school and then came here to work, and I am so amazed by Division III student athletes, especially at schools in the UAA, like NYU, Chicago, all of them, and they're getting these amazing degrees, these very high degrees, while competing and putting in, practice time and film and competition. And so I'm curious just to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love Division III. I loved my experience in Division III, and I love supporting Division III because of the balance. It's like they've got Division III student athletes, I feel like, have 2 full-time obligations in that they're fully committed to their academic experience. And many of them are involved on campus outside of academics and athletics. And also, especially in the UAA, they are competing at an extremely high level. There are so many students on this campus that are Division III student athletes because they are choosing to be, not because they could not be successful at other levels. And so I love it. I think it's the right balance. I think the administrators have the appropriate balance in terms of priorities. And so to me, it's the pure form of college athletics. And as I was I had a really positive experience in my Division I role at the NCAA, but I always knew like something was just tugging at me that I knew I'd find a way to get back to Division III in some way, shape, or form.
So is that kind of what drew you maybe to the Ohio Athletic Conference to get back into that?
Yeah, so I actually wasn't proactively looking for anything, but I had told enough people kind of in my inner circle that when the right opportunity comes up, I'll be ready to go back and work in Division III. The Ohio Athletic Conference is actually another one of the conferences that I was a liaison to, and so I knew some folks in the OAC, and when my predecessor there announced his retirement, started asking some questions, got encouragement from a couple of people in my inner circle, and just felt like the timing was right for me to explore that opportunity. And fortunately, it worked out great. So.
While you were there, what did you maybe learn? It was your first time being in a role like that. So what did you kind of learn that you might have brought here?
So I did take over, in both cases, I took over from commissioners that had lived and breathed that conference commissioner role for 30 plus years. And so I tried to be very careful about making sure that my predecessor there knew that I was going to take good care of his baby, basically. And the same is certainly true here. Dick Rasmussen was a giant in Division III and has been a tremendous mentor to me even prior to me taking this role. And I know that it's really important to him that the UAA stays in good hands. So that's one thing, is just kind of navigating the relationship as you take over something from somebody that has had an influence on it for so many years. And then just learning the dynamics of how to facilitate conversation amongst athletic directors, and how the same topic, the way you approach the conversation with coaches would be very different than it would be with athletic directors, than it would be with presidents. Just kind of that nuanced governance work and how to effectively facilitate that conversation. And then, lastly, I think just understanding priorities of coaches and how to deliver on those to the best of our ability, but also when you have to say no to them sometimes. And so when you do have to say no, being able to explain, objectively why you're going to go a different direction.
Do you almost feel a sense of like pressure and this weight on your shoulders when you do take over from somebody who has kind of established their role there? I mean, like you said, Dick had been here for 30 plus years. Do you feel that weight on your shoulders?
I guess weight on the shoulders, yes, but not in a negative way. I mean, it's almost like I'm honored to have the opportunity to kind of carry on what he started. And Dick is unique too in that he's the only commissioner that the UAA has ever had. So, I mean, he has entirely built this thing from the ground up. And so I feel ownership of it and making sure that we continue to move it in a positive trajectory. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's pressure, but it's positive pressure for the most part.
So now you've been in this role going on almost a year, and I'm sure this past year has probably just been getting like your footing and figuring things out. But what does your day-to-day kind of look like in the office, and what do you kind of do around town?
Yeah, so I always tell people that the day-to-day depends on kind of the season that we're living in. And my seasons don't necessarily follow the same cadence as the sports seasons on campus. But right now we're here for the swimming and diving championship. Tim Farrell, one of my staff members, will be at Case Western this weekend for the wrestling championship, and then we've got indoor track and field here in a couple of weeks, and I'll try to see some basketball in there. So there are certain periods of the year where it's championship heavy, and my focus is really on delivering a positive championship experience for our UAA student athletes, and that's the majority of my day-to-day energy right now is dedicated to that. But as I prepare for an athletic director meeting or a president's council meeting, I'm making sure that I'm educating myself. I'm spending a lot of time educating myself on the national issues that are at play, the issues that are of importance to our UAA coaches, and thinking about how to facilitate some of that conversation with whichever group I'm going to talk with that particular week. So there's sort of seasons of my year where it's governance work heavy, meeting facilitation heavy. And then kind of sprinkled in all the time, there's compliance work. There's making sure that our operating policies and procedures are consistent and are up to date. There's making sure that our student athlete advisory committee feels heard and is able to influence kind of the direction of our work. Making sure that our DEI committee is influential and is informing the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. So the reason I like Division III is because there is no normal day. I'm sure that you experience that in your role too, Taylor. But yeah, it kind of goes in phases.
I definitely, you'd mentioned like the problems in Division III right now, and I definitely want to get into later your time at the NCAA convention a few weeks ago. But first of all, I want to talk about, now that we're here and, we're talking about swim and dive championships and basketball coming up and all of that, just the success in the UAA is, I mean, I might be biased, but I think like the best in Division III. I mean, we've got 4 men's basketball teams in the top 25. NYU's number 1 in the women's on the women's side. We've got WashU women's soccer winning a national championship. Can you just touch on that success? And do you almost get like shell shocked seeing it? Because I feel like I'm amazed by it.
It's incredible. Well, and and balance the athletic success with the fact that all of these student athletes are so much brighter than I will ever be on my best day. It's remarkable what they do on and off the field. I told someone the other day, last year during 23-24, the UAA as a conference won 6 national championships, and we sponsor 20 sports as a conference. So this is Washington and Lee math. This isn't UAA math. But I think about 30% of the sports that we sponsor were winning national championships, and that's incredible. And then you look at everyone's current place in the NACTA Directors Cup, and the success of the league really speaks for itself. It almost is. It kind of lulls you into this false sense of security. Like, you just assume that you're going to have an excuse to go to a national championship every sports season, which I realize is a privilege for sure.
Yeah. So now we'll go back. I want to talk about your time at the NCAA convention. You know, there was a lot going on over those few days. So what was your biggest takeaway from that trip?
Yeah, so I have been to a lot of NCAA conventions. When I was on NCAA staff, that was kind of our Super Bowl. One of the things that's interesting to me in the UAA specifically, a lot of conferences will meet at the convention, but they won't conduct a full business meeting. They're really just talking about the legislation that'll be voted on the next day at convention. But I really appreciated that we actually had a full business meeting, a full opportunity to engage on the topics that are important to our conference. And I think that we had some really productive conversations there. So that was the highlight of my week, was actually our UAA meeting. I'm a compliance nerd, so I like the NCAA legislation, but there wasn't anything all that controversial this year, so nothing that caused too much legislative drama. But so my answer might be different in a different year. But yeah, the UAA meeting was really, really positive.
Awesome. So now I want to talk about, you kind of touched on it earlier, but you are the first female commissioner of both the OAC and the UAA. So what does that kind of mean to you? And, how do you try and maybe set an example for someone in college or maybe in the young parts of their career, and they say, you know what, I eventually want to get to that leadership role. How do I do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is a question that I actually had a really hard time answering early in my time as a commissioner, because I am the beneficiary of a generation of women that, for the most part, has not had. I've never had a professional door closed to me because of my gender, but I realize that I am right on the edge, because there are women just slightly older than me that have had very negative experiences, both in sport and in employment, and in employment in sport. And so it's important to me that I have that story to tell, and that I can be candid, that I do think that so much of the gender equity work that Division III specifically has been doing, but the NCAA as a whole has been working, because I think I'm a beneficiary of that. And at the same time, I think it's important for me to continue to tell the story of the women that came before me, so that those that are younger than me realize that there were times when we kind of had to fight to be even considered in the same room, or to be viable candidates for positions like these. And then I think the way that I make sure that I pave the way for the generation coming behind me is that I take advantage of the opportunities that I'm given, and I succeed in the roles that I'm privileged to hold, so that nobody ever has to question, was it worth hiring a woman in that role? The answer is just obviously yes, that it was. And then I work really hard to, if there's ever anyone that wants to talk to me and learn from what very little wisdom is up here to offer, just try to make sure that I open myself up for mentoring relationships for anybody that might see that be beneficial.
Sticking on somewhat of a similar topic, this weekend for a lot of basketball programs around the UAA is we're celebrating Black History Month. How do you feel as commissioner? Does it make you like proud to see everything that UAA schools do to incorporate and celebrate diversity? I mean, I think everybody's doing something this weekend, which is amazing.
They are, and yes, absolutely. one of the things that struck me, and I take no credit for this because this existed in the UAA prior to me starting, but the Strive Together campaign that our administrators supported really focuses on the importance of inclusion across the sporting landscape and how both serious competition. So me giving 100, I can only be my best if whoever I'm competing against gives their best. So there's a little bit of that in it. And so, leaning heavily on meaningful and complete competition, but also then being able to walk off the court or off the field at the end of the day and know that all of us are kind of in this global fight together to create a better world for the people that come behind us. I think that's a really cool aspect of the UAA. I'm really proud to be a part of that, and I can take absolutely no credit for it. So kudos to our institutions. You continue to prioritize the right things, and even in a time where everything's being politicized, and I think that our schools have continued to value the individualities of each of their students, and I think that's a great thing.
So let's get into now, it's your first trip to Atlanta as commissioner of the UAA. You're very, very busy this week. So what's kind of on your docket while you're here? What are you looking forward to? I haven't been here very long, so I can't give you any good food recommendations, but what are you up to while you're here?
Well, eating is usually the thing I'm looking forward to in any city, but I've had a great day today. I was able to meet with the Emory leadership team, meet with all of the coaches and get some feedback from them, and then was able to meet with President Fenves as well and kind of hear about the UAA from the presidential perspective and learn a little bit about how I can meaningfully support and engage our UAA presidents. I've got a couple more meetings tomorrow with some individual coaches and a couple more leaders in the athletic department. And then after tomorrow, I just get to soak it all in because I think there's baseball this weekend, men's and women's basketball, and a whole lot of swimming and diving. So, look, nobody gets into sport without enjoying watching the competition. So I'm excited to see our student athletes compete.
So in those those meetings that you're having in the conversations, is the topic of kind of you taking in their perspective and then using that to, I guess, move forward your vision for the conference? And what is your vision for the conference moving forward?
Yeah, so it's funny because when I was meeting with the coaches this morning, I told them, look, I'm happy to share my vision, but I also realized that a commissioner role is supposed to, in my opinion, a commissioner that's doing their job well is reflective of the priorities of his or her constituents. So my vision has already, the vision that I shared with the presidents during the interview process is a little bit different than what I would have said at the end of the fall season, is a little bit different than what I would say now. And I'm hoping that as I continue throughout the year, I have even more of a concrete understanding of the priorities of the athletic directors, presidents, and coaches within our league, such that part of their vision inherently then becomes part of mine. So some of the things that we're working on right now and continuing to prioritize is trying to find ways to market, brand, promote the conference, meaningfully engage and use social media and our web presence to target both fans but also current student athletes and prospective student athletes, really to tell the story of the UAA student athlete. To make sure that we've got a visible presence at our UAA championships, which is part of why I'm here now. And again, that's the stuff that I love, so that's easy. And then really just kind of chipping away at slowly modernizing conference operations and making sure that what we're doing now is reflective of what the student athlete cares about in 2025.
So we always end with somebody giving advice. So what is your advice to someone who might be looking for a leadership role, not even in athletics, just a leadership role maybe in general, who might feel that they can't get there, or they aren't taking the right steps, or they just don't feel like they could get there?
Yeah, so I don't my advice to young people that as they're starting their careers and starting to think about what's next is always be exceptional where you are right now. None of the opportunities that I've gotten would have been possible without somebody from my previous role being willing to advocate for me based on quality of work. I think that it's so common to start thinking about what do I want to do someday, so that you're always chasing after that thing that's going to happen someday, and you forget that part of getting you to where you need to be someday is being really, really good where you are right now. So, I mean, that's, it worked for me, but I don't know. Everybody's going to have a little bit different advice. I really just think being great where you are in the moment is going to open more doors than you realize at the time. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go watch some good competition over at Swim and Dive later tonight, but this was such a great conversation, and we appreciate you taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to sit down with us and chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.